I'm pretty sure you told your stepmother I was dead. The plate slipped right out of her hand. It didn't even break clean, just kind of cracked against the tile and rolled under the dishwasher, and my stepmom just stood there with her mouth open like a fish, one of her gold earrings still swinging from where she'd whipped her head around so fast. I should back up. My name is Winter, and I'm 31 years old, and for almost 26 of those years, I believed my biological mother died of an aortic dissection in a hospital parking lot in Tucson. That's the story I grew up with. That's the story my dad told me when I was 5 and old enough to ask why other kids had 2 parents and I only had 1. That's the story my stepmom, Coraline, kept polishing for me my entire childhood like she was waxing a car. Your mother loved you so much, sweetie. She would have wanted you to have a real family. Cue the tight little hug. Cue the sigh. Cue Coraline going off to redecorate another room of our house with money I didn't yet know wasn't hers. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It started on a Wednesday in September. I remember it was Wednesday because I had a meeting at 10:30 with a couple from Phoenix who wanted to look at townhomes in our price range, which was a fancy way of saying they wanted to live in a zip code they couldn't afford. I worked at a real estate agency in Scottsdale that my stepbrother runs. Yeah, we'll get to him too. I was running late because my car had decided that morning, like a moody teenager, that it wasn't going to start. So I took the bus. I hadn't taken a city bus in maybe 6 years, and I'd forgotten how the seats smell like sunscreen and the floors are sticky, and there's always one guy snoring in the back like he's been there since 1998. I just sat down near the front when she got on. She was small. That's the first thing I noticed. Small and probably in her late 60s, with a faded canvas tote bag and one of those plastic grocery store rain bonnets even though it wasn't raining. Her shoes didn't match her clothes. She had on a nice cream blouse, the kind a woman would wear to a doctor's appointment if she was trying to look respectable, but the shoes were these scuffed-up sneakers with the laces tied wrong. She was holding a piece of paper in her hand, and she kept looking down at it, and then up at the bus driver, and then down at it again, and you could tell from the way her eyebrows kept going up and down that she was lost. She tried to ask the driver something, and he just kind of grunted at her without looking up, and she shuffled back, and there were no seats. Like, none. Wednesday morning rush, every seat was full of people on their phones pretending they didn't see her. I stood up. It wasn't a hero move. I want to be clear about that. I didn't think I'm going to do a kindness today. I just stood up because my mom, my biological mom, the one I thought was dead, used to stand up for old people on the bus. And even though I didn't really remember her, I remembered that somehow. I'd been told that, and it had stuck. Ma'am, please sit here. She looked at me like I'd offered her $1 million. Like her whole face just kind of crumpled into this grateful smile, and she said, "Oh, sweetheart, are you sure?" And I said yes, of course, and I helped her ease down because her hip seemed to give her trouble. I didn't sit down. I stood up the rest of the way, holding the rail, and she kept looking up at me like she was trying to memorize my face. After a minute, she patted the empty bit of seat beside her and said, "Honey, share with me. There's room." And there wasn't really, but I sat anyway. Half a cheek, to be polite. She asked me where I was going, and I told her my office, the real estate agency on Camelback. She said she was trying to find a doctor's office on Indian School Road, and she'd gotten on the wrong bus. I helped her figure out where she needed to transfer and showed her how to ask the driver for a transfer slip, and she kept saying, you're very kind, in this trembly way that almost made me uncomfortable, like I was getting credit for something tiny. Then she asked me my name. Winter, I said. With a Y? She went very, very still. I remember it because the bus hit a pothole right at that moment, and everyone bounced except her. She just sat there, frozen, with her hand on her purse. And I thought maybe she was having one of those little absence seizures my aunt used to have. I asked if she was okay. She said, "Winter is a beautiful name. Was that your mother's choice or your father's?" It was such a weird question that I laughed. I told her I didn't know, that my mom passed away when I was little, so I never got to ask her. And then I told her, I don't know why I told her this, I never tell strangers this, that I'd always assumed it was my mother who picked it, because my dad's the kind of guy who would have named me Karen. She didn't laugh. She looked out the window, and she said, very quietly, She picked it. She loved that name. It was her grandmother's middle name. I stopped breathing. I know how that sounds. People say, I stopped breathing like it's a figure of speech. I'm telling you, my chest physically locked up. I sat there with my mouth open and the bus making that diesel rattle, and I said, I'm sorry, what did you just say? And she looked at me and her eyes were full of tears, and she said, Sweetheart, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. What is your father's name? I told her. Donald Pemberton. Don. I added the Don part because that's what people call him, and I was answering on autopilot because my brain had gone somewhere else. She closed her eyes. She closed her eyes and she put her hand over her mouth and she said, Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. The bus pulled up to my stop. I didn't get off. I sat there with the stranger crying quietly into her hand, and I said, Ma'am, who are you? She didn't answer me. She just opened her purse with shaking hands and pulled out a wallet, and she pulled out a photograph that was so old and creased that the corners had gone soft like fabric. She held it out to me. It was a picture of a baby in a yellow blanket on a hospital bed. The baby was kind of squashed looking, the way newborns are, and there was a woman in the bed holding her, and the woman had my exact face. My exact face. Not a resemblance, not a you have your mother's eyes thing. My face, looking down at me. That's you and my daughter, the old woman said. That's the day you were born. I was the first person to hold you after she did. Your father took the picture. My ears started ringing. I said, My mother is dead. She said, Sweetheart, your mother is alive. Your mother is in Bakersfield. Your mother has been looking for you for 26 years. The bus stopped at the next stop. People got on. People got off. I didn't move. The old woman was crying quietly and gripping my hand so hard her knuckles were white, and she kept saying, I knew it. I knew it. I knew if I just kept looking, I would find you. I was numb. I want to be honest about that. I wasn't sobbing or screaming or any of the things you see in movies. I was just sitting there feeling like the floor had fallen out from underneath me and I was waiting to hit something. I have to go to work, I heard myself say. Sweetheart, I have to go to work. I have a meeting. Please, I need to think. She nodded. She nodded over and over like she understood. She wrote down her number on the back of the lost doctor's office paper and pressed it into my hand and said, I'm staying at the Days Inn on Camelback, room 217. My name is Juniper. I'm your grandmother, your other grandmother. Please call me when you can think. Please don't disappear. I got off at the next stop, 6 blocks past my office, and I walked the 6 blocks back, and I don't remember a single thing about that walk. I don't remember the heat. I don't remember if I cried. I just remember walking into the office and going straight past the receptionist and into the back kitchen and standing there staring at the coffee maker because I'd forgotten how coffee makers worked. My stepbrother found me there. His name is Royce. He's my stepmom, Coraline's son from her first marriage, 3 years older than me, and he's been the manager of the Pemberton Hayes Realty office since my dad and his stepdad, Don, promoted him 5 years ago. Royce has those very white teeth that look like they were ordered from a catalog, and he has never, in all the years I've known him, asked me a single question about my own life. You're late, he said. I told him I'd had an emergency on the bus. What kind of emergency? I almost told him. I almost did. I had the words right at the front of my mouth. I think I just met my mother's mother, and something stopped me. I don't know what. Some animal part of my brain that had been listening to 26 years of small, weird inconsistencies and had just woken up. My car broke down, I said. Stomach thing. I'll be ready in 5. He looked at me funny, but he left. I went into my little glass-walled office and I closed the door and I called my dad. He didn't pick up. I called Coraline. She picked up on the second ring, all bright and sing-songy. Winter, darling, what a treat. Are you coming for dinner Sunday? I said. Coraline, did my mom die in Tucson? There was a silence on the other end of the line that lasted maybe 1 second too long. Honey, what kind of question is that? Are you all right? Did something happen? Was it Tucson? The hospital? Sweetheart, that was so long ago, I don't even remember the city. Your father knows. You should ask him. Are you driving? You sound funny. I said I was fine. I told her I'd been thinking about Mom because I'd seen a woman on the bus who looked like the picture of her on Dad's dresser. I made it sound dreamy and emotional. I made it sound like nothing. Coraline said, "Oh, sweet girl. Oh, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to come pick you up?" I said no. I hung up. I sat there in my chair and I looked out the glass wall at Royce flirting with the receptionist, and I thought, something is very, very wrong here. That night I drove to the Days Inn. Unipa opened the door before I'd finished knocking. She'd been waiting. The room smelled like that universal motel room smell of fabric softener and old carpet, and there was a thin manila folder on the little round table by the window, and she sat me down and she opened it. I'm going to tell you what was in that folder as fast as I can, because I lived through it slow and you don't deserve that. My mother's name was Larissa. She did not die. When I was 4 years old, she had a major manic episode. She had bipolar disorder, undiagnosed at the time, and a postpartum trigger that took years to crash down on her, and she was hospitalized for 6 weeks. During those 6 weeks, my father, Don Pemberton, met a recently divorced bookkeeper at his accountant's office, whose name was Coraline Hayes. By the time my mother got out of the hospital, my father had already filed for emergency custody on the grounds that my mother was an unfit and unstable parent. Larissa contested it. She fought for 2 years. She was poor, she had no family in Arizona, and her own mother, Junipa, was in California taking care of Larissa's father, who had Parkinson's. My father won full custody. He was awarded the house. He was awarded the sole decision-making authority over me. And then, when I was 5, he told me my mother had died. He told my mother that I had been told she abandoned me and that I never wanted to see her again. He had a lawyer send her a letter saying that any contact with me would be construed as harassment and that he would file restraining orders. She wrote me letters, hundreds of letters. They came back stamped, returned to sender, in handwriting that was not the post office's. It was Coraline's. We have the envelopes. Junipa kept them. She kept all of them in a plastic bin under her bed in Bakersfield for 26 years. But here is the part that made me put my head down on that motel table and feel like I was going to throw up. When I was 12, my mother's father, Junipa's husband, passed away, and he left a trust. Not huge, but substantial. A house in Bakersfield, some farmland in the Central Valley, and an investment account he had built over 40 years of working at a refinery. The trust named me, Winter Pemberton, his only grandchild, as the primary beneficiary to receive the entire amount on my 25th birthday. He had sent legal notification of this to my last known address, which was my father's house. I never saw it. When I turned 25, the trust paid out, almost $400,000, plus the deed to the house in Bakersfield, plus the title to the farmland. My signature was on every release form. It was not my signature. I sat in that motel room and I looked at my own forged handwriting, looped a little too round, the Y in winter wrong dotted with a circle instead of my flat little dash, and I thought about the kitchen remodel Coraline had done 2 years ago, the one with the marble. The one I told her was beautiful, the one she'd paid cash for. I drove home at midnight and I sat in my apartment in the dark, and I did not cry. I did not quiet anyone. I did not eat. I sat on my couch and I made a list on a yellow legal pad of every single thing I needed to figure out, and at the top of the list I wrote, "Do not tip them off." For 2 months I went to work and I smiled at Royce, and I went to Sunday dinners at my dad's house, and I let Coraline kiss me on the cheek, and I asked her about her tennis lessons. I helped her pick out a new dishwasher. I watched her hand my dad his blood pressure medication. And meanwhile, in the evenings, I drove out to a coffee shop in Tempe to meet with a forensic accountant Unipa's lawyer had connected me with. And on Saturday mornings, when Coraline thought I was at hot yoga, I was sitting in the law offices of a woman named Patrice O'Coffer going through every single document in that bin from Bakersfield. We found the original trust documents. We found the forged signatures. We pulled the bank records. We had to subpoena some of them, and we tracked the money. We tracked all of it. The house in Bakersfield had been sold. Coraline had pocketed the proceeds. The farmland had been leased out under a corporation she set up in Delaware. The lease income had been going into her personal checking account for 6 years. That was how she'd paid for Royce's MBA. The investment account had been quietly drained over 18 months and used to buy out the previous owner of Pemberton Hayes Realty, which had been a struggling outfit my father had been propping up with loans. Coraline had used my money, my mother's father's money, to bail out my father's business and install her son as manager. Royce knew. Patrice and I were sure he knew. We just couldn't prove it yet. And my mother, Larissa, was alive. She was 61. She had been in remission for 19 years. She had remarried, briefly, in her 30s, and had no other children. She worked part-time at a public library in Bakersfield. She lived in a duplex 2 blocks from her mother. Juniper told me she had a little garden with tomato plants and a cat named Doodle, who only had 3 legs. I called her in October, on a Tuesday night, from my car in a Target parking lot, because I didn't want to do it in my apartment in case I broke. She picked up on the first ring. I said, "Mom?" And she made a sound I'm not going to try to describe. We talked for 4 hours. I sat in that parking lot until the Target closed and the security guard tapped on my window. I drove home at 2 in the morning. I had a mother. I had a mother who had spent 26 years writing me letters and putting them in a drawer when they came back. I had a mother who had lit a candle for me on every birthday. I had a mother who knew, somehow, the way mothers do, that I was alive. The day everything came down was a Tuesday in November. I'd been advised by Patrice not to confront anyone until everything was filed. The civil suit was ready. The criminal complaint was with the county attorney. Patrice had built a case so airtight that she said, and I quote, "Honey, this woman is going to need a tooth extraction to get out of what's coming. I want to be very clear. I did not go in and yell at anyone. I did not tip my hand. I did not do the thing every viewer in their right mind told the last girl in this kind of story she shouldn't have done. I went to work that Tuesday morning like normal. I made coffee. I returned emails. I told Royce his shirt was a nice color. At 10:15, 2 sheriff's deputies and a man in a gray suit walked into the office. Royce stood up. Coraline, who was at the office that day to drop off Dawn's lunch, the way she did every Tuesday, came out of the break room with a Tupperware container of leftover pasta in her hand. The man in the gray suit said, "Coraline Pemberton, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, and grand theft." The Tupperware hit the floor. I was standing in the doorway of my office. She looked at me. She looked at me, and her face went through about 9 different expressions in 3 seconds, and the last one was the one I'd been waiting for. It was the realization. It was the O. "Winter," she said. "Winter, sweetheart, this is a mistake. Tell them," I said very quietly, so only she could hear. "I'm pretty sure you told your stepmother I was dead." That wasn't right. I'd rehearsed the line for weeks. I meant, "I'm pretty sure you told my grandmother I was dead." But my brain was full of static, and the words came out wrong, and her face went whiter than the office walls. And you could see her trying to figure out how long I'd known and how much I knew, and which lie she could still try. And there wasn't one. There just wasn't one. She tried, though. God, she tried. She cried in the squad car. She had Royce call me 12 times that afternoon. She had my dad call me. And my dad, that's another story. My dad got 2 years of probation for his role and lost his real estate license, and we don't speak. We may speak again someday. We don't right now. Royce was charged separately 2 weeks later when the forensic accountants finished tracing his end. He's awaiting trial. The civil suit settled. I got back the money with interest. I got back the deed to the house in Bakersfield, which Coraline had sold, but which we successfully clawed back through some legal maneuvering. I still don't fully understand. I got back the farmland. I got back 26 years of my grandfather's quiet, hard-working love that had been intercepted by a woman who watched me grow up, who packed my school lunches, who told me she loved me like a daughter. I quit the office. There was no office to quit, really. It had been seized as an asset and was sitting padlocked behind crime scene tape. but I formally resigned by email anyway because I needed to put it in writing. I changed my name. I took my mother's maiden name back, my grandfather's name. I'm Winter Halverson now. I had to update my driver's license, my passport, my bank accounts, my email signature, and every time I typed it out, I felt a little more solid, like I was shading in a part of myself that had been a pencil sketch my whole life. I moved to Bakersfield in March. I rented out my apartment in Scottsdale. I drove out west on a Sunday with my car packed full of boxes and Doodle, the three-legged cat, in a carrier on the passenger seat. Mom had given him to me, said he'd been waiting to meet his sister. Mom is everything I imagined and nothing I imagined. She's funnier than me. She has my hands. She cries at commercials. She apologizes too much, and we're working on that, both of us, in family therapy. She still has bad weeks. She has a psychiatrist she likes and a medication regimen that works, and she is the single bravest person I have ever met in my life. We have brunch every Saturday at the same diner. She reads to me sometimes out loud in the evenings. She's reading me Anne of Green Gables right now because she said she always wanted to read it to her daughter, and she didn't get to, and would I mind being 26 years late? And I said, no, Mom. No, I don't mind. Juniper lives across the duplex wall. She bangs on the wall when dinner's ready. She is the most stubborn human being on planet Earth. She tells me almost every day that she sat down on a city bus that morning in Scottsdale because something told her to, that she had been visiting a cousin in Phoenix and had 3 different appointments she could have gone to that day, and she picked the one on Indian School Road for no reason at all, that she got on the wrong bus on purpose without knowing she was doing it on purpose. She tells me grace is real and it is sneaky and it works on its own schedule. I got a letter last month. Coraline is in the women's prison in Goodyear. She's serving 6 years and she'll likely do 4. She wrote to me, 3 pages, front and back, in her looping, perfect handwriting, explaining that she had always loved me, that she had only ever wanted what was best for our family, that she was sick now, that her arthritis was bad, and that if I could see my way to putting a little money in her commissary account, she would consider it a kindness from a daughter who had once called her Mom. I read it twice. I thought about a lot of things. I thought about the kitchen remodel. I thought about the school lunches. I thought about the dental work she paid for when I was 16, with money that turned out to be mine. I thought about the woman who had sat in a hospital ward at 28 years old with a baby pulled away from her arms, and the letters she'd written, and the way my real mother apologizes too much because she had to apologize for existing for 26 years before she got me back. I thought about it for a long time. Then I put the letter in the kitchen trash on top of a wet coffee filter, and I closed the lid. I'm not a vindictive person. I want you to know that. I don't lie awake at night picturing Caroline in her cell. I don't toast her conviction. I genuinely hope she gets healthy in there in whatever way she's able to. But I'm not her family. I never was. She made sure of that in 1999, and I made it official in 2025. She had a daughter who called her Mom for 26 years, and that daughter died on a Wednesday in September on a city bus on Camelback Road when an old woman with mismatched shoes asked her name. The new one, the one who came home, doesn't owe her a dime. If you've been kind to a stranger lately and nothing happened, if you helped a woman find the right bus, or carried someone's groceries up a flight of stairs, or stood up so an old man could sit down, I want you to know that you don't always see the ripple. Sometimes the kindness is its own thing and that's all it is. But sometimes the universe has been waiting 26 years to give a piece of you back to you. Stand up anyway, you never know who's getting on the bus. I've thought a lot in the months since all of this came down about what would have happened if my car had started that Wednesday morning, if I'd driven myself to the office like I'd done 1,000 other mornings, if I'd never gotten on that bus, never stood up for a tired woman in mismatched shoes, never told her my name was Winter with a Y. The truth is, I'd still be there. I'd still be eating Coraline's pasta on Sunday nights. I'd still be eating Coraline's pasta on Sunday nights. I'd still be calling Royce my brother. I'd still believe my mother was a sad story in a Tucson parking lot. The lie would have just kept going the way lies do when nobody pulls the loose thread. And one day, I'd have been 45 and remodeling my own kitchen with money that wasn't mine, and I never would have known. What I keep coming back to is this. Coraline didn't fall into what she did. She chose it, day after day, for 26 years. Every time she sealed an envelope and wrote, "Return to sender" on it. Every time she told me my mother would have been so proud of me. Every time she signed my name on a document she had no right to sign. Each of those was a small decision, and each one made the next one easier, until she had built an entire life on top of a woman she had buried alive in a hospital ward in 1999. She did not get caught because she got unlucky. She got caught because the structure of a lie that big can only stand for so long before something, a stranger on a bus, a forgotten photograph, a granddaughter who refuses to give up, comes along and taps it once in exactly the right place. That's not magic. That's just how lies work. They are heavy, and the people carrying them get tired, and gravity is patient. The other thing I keep coming back to is what Juneba kept doing in Bakersfield, all those years with her plastic bin of returned letters under the bed. She didn't know if I was alive. She didn't know if I'd ever read them. She just kept reading. She kept showing up for a granddaughter she might never meet because that was who she had decided to be. And she was not going to let another person's cruelty edit the contents of her own heart. That is the kind of strength I want to learn, not the loud kind, the quiet, daily kind that doesn't need an audience to keep going. And I think about the woman I almost was, the one who would have stayed asleep. I'm not angry with her. She did the best she could with what she'd been told. But I'm grateful every single day now that I stood up on that bus. Not because of what came after, because of what it said about who I was before I knew anything. Be that person, the one who stands up. You may never find out what you saved, but sometimes, and this is the part I'll carry with me, sometimes what you save is yourself.